My name is Val Jelinic. I'm the IoT ecosystem and IoT solution lead at Brunata AG here in Switzerland. We're part of a greater group called the Minol-ZENNER Group, which is based in Germany. And our companies are focused on bringing innovative IoT solutions to core businesses within smart buildings, smart city, and smart utility segments.
Cool. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got into IoT? Like, what's your background and your training and that led you into IoT?
Thanks. It's a really interesting story because during the period of the 2000s, I was working as a business development person with a wireless mesh company. And during this time, there's an explosion in smart city projects happening in America and also in Europe. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to build smart city projects across Spain, in Barcelona, Girona, as well as in Slovenia, France, and Italy, and so on. And so that was the first taste of bringing use cases to a smart city environment that had many parallels to the Internet of Things, because of course all these solutions would use Internet of Things technology, be it very broadband technology. And during this parcours, I joined a company called ABB Switzerland, and I went to this exhibition in Amsterdam. I think it was a Smart City Expo or a Smart Utility Expo, and I was introduced to a technology called LoRaWAN. It was a low power technology, and it just completely blew my mind. It just added a dimension to my work and the focus that I had and my idea of what I thought was M2M and Internet of Things, and blew it out of the water. There was a technology that was an absolute game changer that brought longevity to battery powered devices that had very long distances, 10 to 15 kilometers. And yeah, it suddenly made a lot of use cases economically feasible for a lot of countries. So I actively hunted to join companies that were associated with this low power technology. And I was lucky enough to join one such company who was also the founder of the LoRa Alliance. So I joined Semtech, and I helped that company expand the reach of the LoRaWAN technology and promote the visibility of LoRaWAN as a de facto standard for IoT low power WAN use cases. And so during this parcours, like with a lot of the people that you've interviewed already, like Ali Husseini from Senra and Anne Van Gemert from the LoRa Alliance, we're also a member of the LoRa Alliance. So the Minol-ZENNER Group is an active member within the marketing committee and the technical committees that help the market understand what the technology choices are, what are some of the interesting use cases in which specific verticals that particular technology is perfect for. So within our own company, within Minol-ZENNER Group, they made a very innovative step some years ago where they chose to implement LoRaWAN as their own digital transformation initiative. And so the use cases they were currently fulfilling in property management and billing, which were all analog or manual, they supplemented with LoRaWAN. And as such, Minol-ZENNER Group have the largest private LoRaWAN network in the whole of Germany. So the message here is this technology, low power WAN technology, has arrived and not something that's new. It's quite a mature technology. People forget that the LoRa Alliance was launched in 2015. It's now 2020. So we have a massive ecosystem of experience, lessons learned, maturity, and references, from which companies like our company took advantage from and decided we're going ahead with this. So consequently, we have about, I think it's a million gateways, a million end devices servicing different meters for property management. And the company had the foresight and the vision to say, well, if we're achieving such benefits and advantages from IoT, then why not pass these benefits on and bring these advantages to other segments in the market, such as the utility customers or smart cities, etc. And that's kind of where I work with. I work with my fellow colleagues that are dotted between Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland. And we help partners and customers understand what IoT is and the advantages that our solutions can bring them in the marketplace. So I'm very happy to be involved with that ecosystem and with those experiences that has brought IoT to where it is today.
Cool. Someone's emptying the bins outside, so sorry about the rattle.
No problem.
Okay.
I'll take a bit of drink. Hold on.
Cool, thanks for that introduction. And it's nice to kind of see everyone's journey to get to IoT, because it's such a young, 5 years old, the Alliance, I know, but most of us have been working for more than 5 years. So it's nice to see the journeys everyone has. So if I ask you to describe IoT in your own words, how would you, what words would you use?
This is a tough question because every company within the value chain of IoT, from the chip provider, the module provider, the sensor, gateway, network, architecture, you yourself know because you come from that hardware background in IoT, will answer that in a different fashion. For myself personally, IoT is one of those rare technology waves that visit us over every 30 or 40 years. And I've been lucky enough in my engineering background to have seen the transition from analog to mobile phone, analog to digital mobile phones, the advent of IP telephony and IP and internet communications, and now this remarkable tsunami that's IoT. So what is it for me? It's the ability for anybody or anything to get a granularity on something that they didn't have visibility beforehand. And you had an interesting quote. You said, 5 years isn't a lot of time. Some of us have been in the industry longer, and you're quite correct, because the perspective of IoT is connected, powered, or not powered. This new wave, if you like, is an excitement based around the battery-powered devices, which brings a whole new dimension to IoT. So it enables us to bring technology to areas that haven't been able to lever IoT previously, that was more levered by businesses and industries rather than people or smaller companies. So it's a great enabler. I think it's a game changer when it comes to different business models, and it forces companies to think in a different fashion, whereas beforehand they may have been offering a product or a solution solely. IoT enables them now to become a service provider or offer a service model. So it brings about new business models and new revenue streams for consideration and for exploitation.
I think that's a really nice point about the business models and the transition from product to services. And that's a trend, that I think will only go in one direction. If I then ask you about the ecosystem, because I think you're in a really interesting place. So your job is ecosystem, and your job is to help kind of enable or get people more to use IoT, or for your company to go into different verticals. So if I ask you to describe the IoT ecosystem from your perspective, how do you see that? And then how do you kind of take that into then your customers' ecosystem, and how those two then meet?
Thanks. Specifically here in my country, in my region, it's all about trust. The ecosystem should be seen as a trust bank, a partnership bank. And as you know, with any banks, you've got to make a deposit for you to get something out. So it cuts both ways. The ecosystem gives us advancement on lessons learned and experiences that we don't have to go out and find ourselves. We can go out and find similar experiences with other players within the ecosystem. And as I mentioned before, you have everything from the chip vendors and the semiconductor suppliers through to the cloud platform providers in the end application, and everybody is valuable. Everybody has a stake in the solution. And so, quoting somebody else, the strongest part of our value solution is the weakest link. And so it's our job within the ecosystem to be able to ensure that customers have a choice, partners also have a choice and a variety, that there is an atmosphere of being able to enrich that ecosystem with other players and invite other companies in to expand and broaden the offering and choice, which means that there's not just one flavor of ice cream, but a lot of flavors of ice cream, and there's something for everybody. So Ali Husseini from Senra would say that in India, that ecosystem looks very much different to the ecosystem here in Europe. The ecosystem in Asia is different to the one in America. And we're all at different levels of adoption of IoT. And this is where the ecosystem comes into play. So we can take lessons learned from other regions. We can bring those lessons learned and experiences into our own region. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel in every single country or every single region. We can all help each other, and we're not competing. It's a case of cooperation and collaboration, because we're all chasing the same thing, which is providing the customer, the person, the user, with the value that they want, the value that they expect, as best as we can, because we want to be professional, we want to be trusted, and we want to provide a very valuable service that, of course, justifies the business model. So for me, ecosystem is about trust. It's about partnerships, and it's about leaning on each other to fulfill the needs of a customer.
Yeah, some really nice points came out there. So thanks for that. And I think you're totally right that even though it's an ecosystem made of lots and lots and lots of small players mainly, it is a global phenomenon, and change is happening everywhere. So it's listen and learn and share as much as possible. Okay, so if I then kind of ask us to take a kind of step back and look at this from a slightly different angle, and look more at so if that's the ecosystem and it's about collaboration and sharing and lots of learning, what are the skills that you need when kind of putting together a team to work on an IoT project? What do you think are the kind of core capabilities and things that you need in order to succeed?
There are many dimensions to each IoT project, and it all revolves around the customer. So there's two facets to every project. One is the customer themselves. What kind of business are they in? What kind of pain points are they seeing? And on the other side, how can we bring the right know-how and the right expertise with the right partners from our ecosystem to fulfill those needs? Of course, every company wants to do as much as they can internally. But I think if you stand back and you look at a project and say, okay, we have to be honest here and recognize we may be fantastic in hardware. We produce the best hardware possible for metering, for example, but we're not the strongest in perhaps taking that data information and sticking it in the cloud, making it accessible to everybody, as an example. So we need to bring together not just the competency of the technological component of the solution, but we also have to understand the relationship part of the customer. So traditional business is about selling what you have, selling a product that's complete and works. The customer recognizes that and they just buy it. And IoT is it's a slightly different animal. It can take different shapes depending on what the conversation looks like, or the discussion with the customer, whichever shape it takes form. So the customer engage you at the beginning and say, I need to monitor temperature in my building. But behind that is actually an unspoken need or an unspoken question that says, I'm not sure about this IoT thing, but I want to start with temperature. But my real pain point is my emergency exit, my fire doors are always open. And I've got security people running around, Monday to Friday, checking the security doors. So it's about having that tactile communication partnership ability to rely on those people who can engage with customers and start that discussion and the conversation with the partner, and then bring in the components required to fulfill the need of the customer, and maybe add something on top of that the customer wasn't expecting that delivers a high value. And these don't need to be complex things. If I can just give an example here. So last year I was approached by a restaurant that wanted to monitor the cold room storage refrigeration, because they need to be compliant with the regulator. And so it's a self-control mechanism where they take the measurement of their refrigeration unit and they mark the temperature and they sign off on it. And if the regulator comes visiting, they can show the data. It's all manual. And as we know, people get a little bit lazy or they make mistakes, and all the correct data, let's say, isn't captured correctly. So we fulfill the need where we put temperature sensors, humidity sensors within that refrigeration cold storeroom. And I added a motion detector so that the customer would also see how often are people going into the storeroom, at what times, and for what length of time are people spending. And this has a direct impact on energy consumption. And of course, it may also have an impact on the restaurant with, well, why are staff entering into the storeroom so often? Is there some way we can improve this process so that they can be more streamlined? And as it turned out, after about 2 months of reporting to my customer, we had a chat, and he said, look, I'm kind of noticing an error. And I was very interested as to what kind of error that he was referring to. And he said, well, we're closed on Sundays and Mondays, but yet somebody's going into the storeroom. There's a motion happening inside the storeroom. And of course, the worst comes to mind. It's got to be a pest, a mouse, a rat, or something. And I looked at the data and thought, no, this is happening. This is happening almost every week on Sunday and Monday. And as it turned out, the son of the chef comes home on a Sunday night from university. And of course, he's hungry, and his dad's the chef, so he goes in and he raids the storeroom. And so the chef took that problem, took that insight back to his son, and stopped that issue from happening. So by this means, sometimes the customer themselves don't know what they're looking for, and sometimes we can bring a little bit of insight into lessons learned from somewhere else or from the ecosystem to apply it to the customer.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know till you see the data.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, that's a really, really nice and very tangible example that everyone can understand.
So put a motion sensor in your fridge.
Cool. And then if we then take another kind of step back and kind of look again at a slightly different perspective, and then look at kind of the advice that you can give. So, again, you're talking about the ecosystem, you're talking about the skills and approach that you need to have. You must speak to people who are adopting IoT for the first time, be it in a smart buildings and, restaurants, whatever that application may be, people who aren't necessarily used to working with technology. What advice do you have for people getting started with IoT?
Great question. And something I'd like to mention is that's the case for all size companies. They may be small, medium enterprises, but it's the same for large companies like Honeywell's and the Capgeminis of this world. They all are asking the same or similar questions, no matter what size they are. And so the advice I would give to them is dig and do your homework. Do a little bit of research of what's out there, what's available. Nobody needs to be an expert. But we're lucky that 5 years down the road, at least for low power WAN IoT technology, we're now quite mature. With the other IoT technologies that are available, that's even more of a mature market. So the information is available. I would challenge those companies to do two things. One is don't be afraid. Approach IoT consultant company or companies within the industry that are providing hardware or solution, and simply ask questions. Ask questions and probe, and understand a little bit more about what's available, what is able to be provided, and enter into a discussion with those companies to find out how they can lever to maximum benefit the IoT to either improve, optimize, or streamline business processes, or perhaps even make a positive impact on manufacturing and the manufacturing process itself, as well as to reduce waste and loss, etc. Those are the key kind of catch cries we hear that are same across the board. But the first advice I would give is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to engage and just ask a question. There's no obligation, but you will benefit. You'll benefit greatly from the feedback that you get.
Cool. Good advice. And and I think a lot of it is just taking away some of those barriers. I kind of remember 20 years ago or whatever they said, every company is going to need a website, and if you don't have a website, you won't be able to do this. And everyone's like, rubbish. You can just do business in many other ways. I kind of see digital decision making being in a similar category, that if you're not implementing some of these, advantages to make your business as efficient as possible, then that will ultimately lead to you not being smart enough in how you operate.
I think we're also victims of our own.
Yeah.
I think we're victims of our own industry also, because we speak with terms that people aren't familiar with or a bit afraid of, such as digital transformation. It's like, oh, I'm renting out construction machinery, and you're talking about digital transformation. So we need to get down on the same terms and make our offerings approachable. And I'm guilty of that also. You know, I'm very excited when I speak about IoT. I'm extremely excited when I speak about LoRaWAN and solutions. And often I need to take that, you know, from 11 down to about 9. And that's okay for most people. Yeah. And even, you know, here in Switzerland, perhaps down to 5 or 4 would be much better. But, you know, I'm also learning.
No, it's also language when speaking about technology is super important. So it's a nice
Exactly.
point. Now, if I ask you then one last question, and that's about success. So there's success for you as, you know, the person, you know, the life that you have, you know, living in these Corona times, as we talked about at the beginning, but also kind of, you've got also kind of your job and the ecosystem that you're trying to build. If I ask you what success means to you, how do you answer that question?
Really simply, success for me comes in 2 shapes. One is the pure and simple, I've helped somebody. I've helped somebody understand, I've helped somebody discover or uncover something they didn't know exists. And just getting that personal satisfaction that, wow, okay, now I've given somebody an additional tool set to go off and use. That's number one. Of course, the second is always going to be the realization of a project, seeing what you put together in a discussion and realizing that end product of, yeah, there it is. I've just driven by it, or I drive by it every day. And that person or that customer is getting a benefit from it. You know? And I help do that. So for me, it's 2 things. It's turning the light on. And it's, of course, a success of somebody's using something that I've created.
Cool. Thank you so much, Val. We'll leave it there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christine, for your time. Thanks for the opportunity.